Hi, and welcome back to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, January 29th. We are here with our all-star panel of all-star journalists, Delaney Smith, Nick Welsh, and Josh Molina. Thanks for being with us. So we are up to 285 deaths in Santa Barbara County, 28,000 total cases, 1,685 current cases, and the vaccine is still not available for anyone under the age, at least officially under the age of 75. Is that correct, Delaney? What's the prognosis on vaccinations?
Yep, you're completely correct there. At least officially, anyway, we've heard reports that there's certain areas where people under 75 are getting vaccinated, but officially, no one under 75 is getting vaccinated right now. Santa Barbara County is still doing fairly well with the actual rollout, despite this, compared to the state and the rest of the country. We are still, I think,
but 60% of
60%. So still like double what the state average is right now.
But has it not, am I correct that Gavin has once again changed the rules on this and it's now going to be by age groups only? I thought there was some new order from Sacramento that came down in the last 12 minutes, but maybe
yes, Vonda Reynoso at her Tuesday presentation, this was before the order actually went into effect, but she warned us that yes, they were going to be changing it from based on occupation to based on age.
Yeah.
The question there though is, are those like teachers, grocery store workers, those people who were just about to be in this next group, are they now are they now out of luck here? Do they have to wait based on age, or are they still going to get in like they were initially promised?
Unless you're a 75-year-old teacher or grocery store worker, I think you're pretty much bumped.
Yeah, well, and of course, our colleague Anne Louise Bardock had a story in the I interviewed her the other day in the Montecito Journal about this kind of black market dynamic that's going out there. Apparently, a lot of people had been going to Ralph's, Kroger pharmacy at Ralph's, and they had them scheduled, and then they canceled them. And there's other people that have gone up to Santa Maria. So, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are, kind of trying to elbow each other out of the way to get them. But does the county acknowledge that there's any kind of black market thing going on, or that people are jumping the line, or no, we're just, yeah.
And that question was actually asked last week at a press conference. It's been asked a couple times by reporters directly to public health, and they consistently say that that's not happening.
So we had been hearing reports at UCSB, people younger than 65 or younger than 75 and even in the 30s were getting vaccinated. And we were getting a lot of hits on that. And I knew two people that sounded like that was the case. And I think we reported this was happening. UCSB spent the whole weekend going over its whole list of everybody who got vaccinated. There was nobody in the age of 30 that got vaccinated. There were a few, less than 5 out of all of the ones who were somehow out of the, what they should have been. The allegation is something that the county and UCSB took extremely seriously, because it's really important to them that this is done according to Hoyle and nobody's jumping the line. And so I think that is the case. But the real problem, I think, is you look at the number of where the people are sick, and they're up in North County, and you look at where 45% of the vaccines have been administered, and they're in South County.
Well, I think, yeah, a lot of those to health workers, though, I think.
And they're moving around, like the mobile vaccination pods. I think yesterday we got a report that it moved up to Lompoc. So they are moving to different areas of the county.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of, I mean, I have talked to several people beside Annie who were on this, who did get appointments, who were not 75 at Ralph's, who then received an email canceling their appointments. And so, something's going on. And, for the county to just say, oh, no, everything's fine, exactly as we planned it, I think is a little bit disingenuous, but.
Well, let me give you an example. A friend of mine who is under 75, works for UCSB, had an appointment. And he shows up for the appointment. They say, oh, sorry, you can't have it. So,
He was under 75?
yeah. And so, anyway, I think that they're definitely trying to keep it according to, the rules and regulations. And so, if you have places like, Ralph's where if you tell them Louis sent you, there's just going to be such a mad dash.
Yeah, we can close on it, but just speaking on behalf of the responsible comorbidities community, the problem with this is that there's a lot of people who are 65. There's a lot of people who are 35 who have underlying conditions that put them at greater risk for serious things. And there's been no account made for that whatsoever. First it was based exclusively on employment. Now it's based exclusively on age, but whatever.
I think when they started, they tried to do that. But when I talked to people at Sansom, they said, you know what, when we try to figure out who is at greater risk, it's just as every single person, it becomes King Solomon. And it's not perfect, and there's going to be a lot of problems, but they just figured as a large scale operation, this is much simpler.
Yeah. All
and
right.
Simplicity matters.
Well, Josh, I wanted the Santa Barbara School District is certainly champing at the bit, as one reporter put it this way, to get back into class. Now, talk about what happened at the meeting, but then also there's this thing where my understanding was that Gavin had this $2 billion fund that he wanted to help schools do that, but they had to pass it by February 1. And there's just been nothing but a big cluster mumble up there in Sacramento because the teachers don't want to do it. So where do we stand on going back to school?
Well, before I go there, I need Nick Welsh, who's left the screen, to explain to me what according to Hoyle means and his King Solomon reference, because just remember we are talking to a mainstream audience. So when he comes back,
wait a minute, you don't know what according to Hoyle means?
Oh no, Jerry, of course I know what it means, but for our audience.
Delaney, do you know what according to Hoyle means?
No, I do not, Jerry.
Hoyle is the institutional repository of all of the rules of all card games everywhere. And what was your other question, Josh?
Nick, I was just saying that if you're going to bring these $2.50 conversations to the show, you should elaborate on according to Hoyle. But we got that figured out. What about King Solomon? Can you link that for me?
Cutting the baby in half.
Cutting the baby in half. That's right, Josh. I'm surprised that you're nowhere on your Bible reading today. Now, what about the?
I'm just trying to dissect Nick's mixed metaphors. That's all.
Well, I believe that according to Hoyle, is a King Solomon cut is when you cut the cards exactly in half. But anyway, Josh, what about the schools?
Okay, so you're right. Governor Newsom announced this plan to bring kids back to school, and there's funding to go along with it. But what came up at the previous meeting and what came up at this meeting was that there isn't really anything that's happened since then. This still needs to go through the state legislature. There still needs to be some kind of approval, and there's no actual method to distribute these types of funds. So the school board the school district is ready to to reopen once they actually can get the get-go. And so they have to submit some sort of application by February 1st, which is Monday. And then once the cases drop, they're going to be ready to open. But there's no talk about exactly how they're going to receive this funding. There's talk of funding that's necessary for testing for kids, but no real explanation of how that would work. And that's, Delaney wrote about that more than I did, but it's how are they going to test all these kids? What format? Kits? Who's going to do it? Is there staffing? It's very complicated. So the school district is, of course, saying we're ready to go back to school, but they're not, because there's actually no way to to school right now until the cases drop. And then those critics who are still calling in are saying, why were you not ready back in October? And now you're ready. And then what I wrote about a little bit was how there's been like a tripling of cases of COVID-19 positive cases at school sites just in the last month among staff and teachers from the cohort. So that's sort of interesting as well, that we're seeing an increase of that. Of course, very small percentage compared to the overall number of people who are on these campuses, but that is new. So they're kind of all dressed up, but nowhere to go at this point.
Yeah, Delaney, Josh strongly suggests that the district is doing this merely for political reasons, so they can all the board members can, when they get these angry emails, can say, hey, it's not our fault, we're all ready to go. What was your takeaway on the plan?
I think that was true at first, but I do think that the district is genuinely, like I said, champing at the bit to reopen now. The application Josh is referring to is the safety plan. It's required by all schools, even the ones that are already in hybrid format, to provide and go over with public health. We have that ready. What was originally going to be our waiver to open elementary schools, that information was taken and almost repurposed into this learning or the safety plan. And they're ready. As soon as our case rate gets down to 15, that we're ready to open. They already submitted it. They submitted it on Tuesday.
So did they need the extra state funding? Or
yes, they do for testing. And so like Josh said, testing is incredibly expensive. They have to test every child and staff member. Was it weekly or monthly? I believe it's weekly. And even figuring out, let alone take the money aside, just what are the logistics of that? Are we going to be taking kids out of classrooms in groups? Are they just going to get their class time interrupted because they're going to be taken out to get tested every week? Trying to get these thousands of kids tested and the staff tested every week that's a big deal here. But that's all in the plan. And I do see that the district has formulated something back when we actually had the opportunity, back when we were in the red tier.
And what did you say the case rate we need to be at is?
It's 15.
And where are we?
I believe, Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's
25.
25. Okay, 25. Maybe it's 15 for the secondary schools.
And where are we now?
We are at 40 something right now. So we're high, but we're on the downward trend. We really are. So there is hope there that in the next few weeks we're going to be ready. But like I was saying, when we were back in the red tier, we weren't this ready. We didn't have a plan of this scale. That just wasn't there. There was no way to even try to submit an elementary waiver. Now, although timing is bad, the plan is solid.
Yeah, I just think politically it goes back to the teachers union, the CTA and Newsom are at odds about this, and they're usually BFFs, and I don't know how it's going to happen. Was Karen McBride, did she talk at the meeting at all? Did she talk about where the teachers are on this?
She did call in, and she did. It was sort of she complimented the district and the board for working and collaborating and getting this far. I did not get a clear sense from her comments as to whether she was ready to say the teachers are ready to go back. it was more of a thank you for working with us and doing this much work to get us to this point. It was more of a general comment.
All right. Okay. And then Nick, I guess yesterday, Thursday, the legislature, both houses passed the eviction moratorium to extend it to when? To June?
The end of June. So it's actually kind of an interesting deal. So basically, to the end of June, landlords cannot evict tenants who don't pay because of COVID. It would have expired at the end of January, which is 2 days. So that's a huge deal. And the idea is that the state would tap into federal COVID relief funds, like 2.6 billion with a B, to pay off 80% of what is owed in back rent to the landlords.
Really?
But that would-
Statewide? That's and that's commercial and residential?
No, that's all I know is residential. And but that's conditional on those landlords forgiving the other 20.
I was just trying to save you from Dick Birdie. I could hear his head exploding there, Nick, when you said that. That's all.
No, this is yeah. Jim Canal will have something to say in particular, but in this particular case, this is residential and 80% of back rent. If the landlord forgive the other 20%, but they don't have to. And that's kind of the sticking point that the tenants are saying is like, well, if the landlords don't want to do it, they can still evict you and we'll be screwed. But it seems like this one's going to pass. Governor Newsom has to sign it, and he's indicated that he will.
And this is money, federal money that's in hand, or is this money that Joe Biden's going to get out of the Republican Senate?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. They got to
I
wait.
think it's more in hand than not.
Yeah. And Delaney, what were the supervisors doing on eviction? They were just trying to
That
bar
was
the door in case the state didn't act?
Yes, and that exactly, and that was on commercial evictions, not residential. And they extended it through the end of March, but they tweaked it a little bit from what our previous ordinance was, which it means it includes more protections for landlords. Like tenants have to pay 25% of their rent rather than nothing at all, and a couple extra additional landlord protections, and it did nearly pass, got the 4/5 vote, which was required.
After the perjury clause was put in, as I read, and I think that was in your story I read. Is that correct?
Mm-mm.
People had to swear under penalty of perjury that this was as a result of COVID. Maybe.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Meanwhile, over at the city council, Josh, your favorite issue, the project labor agreement, also known as the sweetheart deal with unions, came up. And who was out there leading the parade for this but council member Megan Harmon, she of the, I'm a moderate business person who's against the PLA when she came on the council, but has suddenly become the #1 tribune of this issue. What happened?
So the city council approved a PLA, and they had already indicated that they were going to go this direction. So this is requiring any contractor who partners with the city on a city project of $5 million or more to use unionized labor. And they went in through the weeds and put a bunch of different specific requirements for how many should be local, and whether and how much they should pay for benefits. And so it's essentially a fundamental issue of, do you think that the city of Santa Barbara should use unionized contractors for building public projects? Or do you feel as though there are plenty of contractors in Santa Barbara are not
In the
part
city,
of the,
yeah.
in the city, who are not part of the unions who can build these projects? And so it's a political issue, because whether you stand on, whether you're pro-union or anti-union, and so the people who say we don't need a PLA say, we all know how to build these buildings the same way. We're all trained the same way. These buildings that we've been building for years are great and fine. And there's really not a lot of difference other than Democratic elected officials want to try to filter these funds to the unions who typically support them.
Who then,
during office.
you know, kick back a certain percentage in campaign contributions to it.
Yeah, so that's what the argument against this is politically. The unions, of course, say, hey, we're trained, we're local, we have apprentice programs, we're not necessarily just hiring anybody to show up for a job. As far as our subcontractors, these people have gone through the process and they're trained. And of course, the Mike Jordans of the world saying, we've been using mostly non-union workers for decades, and what's wrong with our public?
And you remember
buildings?
all those city projects where the roof fell in because we weren't using the right guys. I mean,
Nick Welsh will remember the problem with the Granada Garage a long time ago, where the sidewalks were too narrow and they had to extend it out, which is why if you ever tried to turn in the Granada Garage, it's funky. That's the only one that I can think of, but that was clearly a city botched project. But politically, Megan Harmon, which is what you want to talk about.
Well, no, I want to just clarify one thing, because when you say local, of course, the definition of local in this is not the city of Santa Barbara at all. It is the tri-counties. It's SLO, Santa Barbara County, and Ventura. So they've broadened what the local is. And in fact, it is entirely possible, if not likely, that fewer city of Santa Barbara of workers are going to get these jobs.
It is possible. They will be unionized. So we might see more unionized workers from San Luis or Ventura working on Santa Barbara jobs, as opposed to non-unionized city of Santa Barbara employees. So this is a really interesting issue. But what was interesting was, yes, Megan Harmon came out super early, her and Eric Friedman. This is good public policy, they said. But what the most interesting dynamic was between Councilmember Kristen Sneddon and Kathy Murillo, because Mayor Kathy Murillo was in the meeting and she was sort of counting votes. And at one point she said, well, we're at 4 votes. And then Kristen Sneddon turned on her microphone, wanted to talk, and Council Murillo started to do what if me or Nick or you try to do would be called mansplaining. She basically said, I know you're not going to like the vote, but I know you don't like the motion, but what do you have to say? And Kristen, this is the most animated I've ever seen her. She's like, how do you know that? How do you know that I'm not going to like the motion? She had things to say. She was offended, so she lost her cool briefly. But she basically said that, I can't believe you just said that. I do have things to say. I want to compromise. And Kathy Murillo pushed back and said, I didn't hear anybody else take up your causes. So that's kind of small and petty. Like, you know, when you're the chair, you should.
Wait a minute, small and petty? And who's that in reference to?
Conversation. And then Mike Jordan comes on and says, I can't believe you just said that, Mayor. I agree 100% with everything Kristen said. So it's kind of an awkward moment for the mayor. So it was just a very fascinating meeting. I'm sure Nick saw it. And
well, Nick, and as the #1 apologist for Mayor Kathy Murillo, let me ask you this. I mean, okay, if you do nothing else as the mayor, you got to run the meeting. Now we're almost 3.5 years into this, and she still can't run the meeting. So, what do you?
She's getting better at running the meeting.
She's getting better. I know she's getting better.
She's definitely better, but that was, you know, if you're running the meeting, you actually have to let the opposition or people with a dissenting point of view have their turn. And I will say that it's hard not to think that Kathy, as soon as Kristen Sneddon starts speaking, her impatience becomes manifest. And she has a hard time listening to Kristen, it appears, and wants her to hurry up and get on with it. And so they have a dynamic which is not a happy one. And then Mike Jordan, I mean, his whole point was we need to have some metric, and it was Kristen's as well. Okay, how do we measure the success of this in terms of local workers? So we need to have some real numbers. And the unions were saying 25%. And Mike Jordan wanted 60%. And Kristen Sneddon, I think, cut the baby in half, King Solomon, I'm 50%. And so
Is that what they ended up with, or
that's
did
what
you
they
not?
ended up with. But the deal is, it's like there was a lot of teeth sucking going on amongst the council members after that meeting. Kathy Murillo is running for re-election. So is Eric. So is Megan Harmon. And I guess Monday we're going to have James Joyce announce that he's going to run for mayor. We have Deborah Schwartz, the planning commissioner, who's running. So everything is getting very tense and bristly. And what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of people in City Hall who were put off by that.
Yeah, and let me just make 3 quick points. One is, Kathy said that, Josh, in your story, she said the quiet part out loud, which is we really need to start making this a union town. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what she said. 2, Nick, I'm sure you heard with me that all the members of the council who voted for this said, and we promise we're not going to accept any campaign contributions from the crafts unions that are directly affected by this. That was number 3. And 3, Megan Harmon is a sore disappointment to me. She told at least 3 members of the council when she was looking for their votes to get that seat, she was against this. And now she says she has, quote unquote, evolved in her views, and we'll be watching her campaign statements as well as on that.
Jerry, let me just say, Megan Harmon was the savior. She did agree to Kristen Snedden's request for 50%, and she convinced Eric to change the motion. So you can say that, but she did try to bridge the middle a little bit. But you really should not be surprised that politicians say things and then they do things differently. It's kind of the way the
Josh,
world works.
I somehow thought she was different.
I know, you had your heart broken, but here's the deal, Jerry. One of the reasons why Santa Barbara, the cost of living and what people make, there's such a chasm between that is because this is such a non-union town. And it is a fact when you look at the middle class and the shrinking middle class, the shrinking and sinking kind of corresponds almost perfectly to the disappearance of unions. So, you may not like unions, or you may not like the influence of unions, particularly in the campaign contributions, and it does feel creepy. I got that. But the reality, as sort of a writ large fact of life, is that they do create more of a buffer for the middle class.
Here's my point. I am not anti-union. I am in fact pro-union and have been my whole life. My criticism is if the unions want union work, why don't they unionize the private contractors? Why are the only union jobs all coming out of the public treasury? That's where the unions are. It's what, 3, 4, 5, 6%, something like that. And it's all coming out of City Hall, out of the county. There aren't any unions anywhere else. So why don't they do the hard work of organizing in the private sector instead of just putting their hands in, doing this kickback arrangement with the elected officials? We got to go, Delaney. When is this learning loss story?
I know.
Keep telling me.
It's going February 18th. The story is ready to go. It's just holding.
All right, we're gonna look for that.
Jerry, as far as your logic, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. If I could speak political talk. Also, I understand your birthday's coming up February 1st. Happy birthday. And thank you for everything you do. You're still the #1 journalist in this town. We all follow you, and I'm honored to be on your show every week.
Thank you, Josh. I'm waiting
for the good work.
I'm waiting for the but here. Yes, well, thank you very much for that. And despite what everybody on Facebook says, I'm only 72, so 3 more years I'll be able to get a vaccine. Nick, maybe I'll take yours.
You can take mine. That's my birthday present.
Just go to Santa Maria and get yours.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. I apologize for ranting. Not. All right, I will see you next time.